Happy Project Cheap Day. I'm out today trying to ride on the cheap. The bike of choice to be Project Cheap is the Hyper Explorer, which you can see here in its full factory form. And if you're a regular viewer here on Kev Central, you'll know the Explorer, part of two bikes that were meant to replace the Hydroform. There was the Explorer full suspension, which I didn't like that much. It had a steel rear triangle for some reason. But there's also this Hardtail, which was the better of the two in my opinion. Back to the Hyper Explorer, which this Hardtail, the better of the two, as I've already mentioned, and it had that Hyper Hydroform blue, or at least some people think. It's actually one shade darker. But the Explorer has a few things going for it in its factory form. It has a 1x drivetrain. We asked for that for years. Finally started getting them on big box bikes. This one, a snafu. And in one facet of the 1x, they kind of upstaged Schwinn and Mongoose a bit by including this, a chain guide. And like its Walmart big box counterparts, they upgraded the back of the drivetrain as well, went with a wider range freewheel setup. This, the Falcon Sacr, this derailleur, not that bad for a budget big box derailleur. So let me tell you what I decided to do parts-wise with this and why I'm calling it Project Cheap. I got a magnet first and foremost. I wanted to see what was steel and what wasn't. That's a candidate, though I'm really thinking of leaving these bars. The stem alloy, so that can possibly stay. Crank arms alloy. The wheels. I wanted to look at these wheels because I couldn't remember. I know I'm going to keep these factory tires, even though they're more street knobbies than trail knobbies. They're kind of that hybrid, but not ultra grippy, but not that bad. I can use these, at least on the green trails out at the trail. But I want to make sure that these rims are double wall because, again, I can't remember. It's been so long since I've ridden this bike. It's basically been a loaner, and it's only been loaned out a few times. Other than that, it's just been sitting in the basement. Fortunately, yes, double wall. So these can stay. Drivetrain, I'm going to leave all that the same. I'm going to keep with the factory drivetrain and its chain guide, because remember, Project Cheap, that would get into some money. The seat post also steel, so extra weight there, but I'm going to keep that, and this saddle. So let's see what I'm going to end up with parts-wise. I'm going to just cut to the chase and show it to you. Here it is, Project Cheap, made from the Hyper Explorer Hardtail. You can see I kept some of that original stuff. The drivetrain, all factory. I kept that seat post, that heavy steel seat post, and the snafu saddle. Most of my changes, and there are 4 changes here. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 changes. There are 5 changes here. You can see up top right away, I did get rid of those bars, and I debated about this because I did want the wider, although this 760 millimeters, a little outside of my comfort zone of 720 to 740, at least for the local trails. But I wanted to save weight, and I found these. You remember Jessica's? I used them, ironically, on the Hyper Hydroform. They've got the little skull logo, and the orange trim, the orange theme of these bars goes with my grips, which are new grips to me and to this channel. See the logo there? Very nice grips. A copy of something that I've seen, but I can't remember what had this pattern. These are Cogsters. Cog as in gear cog, which is kind of a cool name, and even their logo, if you can see it there. It's a gear cog. Very nice grips. These are comfortable. I'm impressed with these. $11.99. Not bad at all. So a good upgrade there. The bars themselves, I paid $18.99 for these, but I've had them for over a year, so I don't know what today's pricing is. And you can see I made one more change up top with the stem. This is a 40 millimeter stem. The factory stem was, I believe, 80 millimeters. It was kind of on out there. Wanted a little more comfort. So I went with this, and it's orange. I don't know how well you can tell. It's pretty ugly, I'm going to be honest. In person, it probably looks worse than it looks on camera, but you can see it's got some orange that matches some of the other orange here. But this stem, at the very least, puts me in the position that I want to be. So that part's good. I paid $8.99 for the stem, so another extra expense, but not too much. And speaking of budget, the one thing that was my main part, the big expenditure, a grand total of $118.88 is this. The new Air Fork, which is orange. If you're a Denver Broncos fan, I guess this is going to do you well because you get that blue and orange color, and you may say, wait, you're from Alabama. What about the Auburn Tigers? Well, look, if you're from Alabama, you got to pick a side. I have a side, and it's Roll Tide, so I'm not giving Auburn the credit here for the blue and orange. And the reason I use this fork is because the Hyper Explorers have this bizarrely narrow, old school looking head tube. I don't know why they did this, but no taper. And yes, I know you can get an external adapter to make a taper, but I don't like to do that. Changes geometry and does all kinds of things. So well, it's not as strong in my opinion, but I went with this fork. This is an air fork with a manual lockout, but yeah, the brand that I do not like, and look at this, already squirting out oil all over this stanchion, which is 32 millimeters, and you can see 100 millimeters of travel on this fork. And you have heard me rant about these forks. The ZTZ, the only cheap air fork that I've ever had that actually failed right out of the box. Not this one though, it worked out of the box, which is good, and I like the orange color. I actually bought this not for this project, but for something else. As a matter of fact, the grips and this fork were bought together for some project, but can't remember what that was. So it's just been sitting. It's been sitting for 3 months now. So I decided to put it to use here, even though it is a ZTZ. The reason I think this ZTZ may fare a little better than my other one, my ZTZ fail fork, is because it doesn't have a rebound adjustment and it doesn't have that secondary air chamber on the other side, which was the defective part, that I guess a factory defect in my first one, which can happen. But these forks, the Bologna, the ZTZ, the Lutu, all that stuff, they're cheap forks, so you get what you get. But as I mentioned many times, it doesn't take much to be better than the factory fork. So even though these are cheap and they're kind of replaceable, if you get one that works, they're better than the factory fork by a long shot. So there's that. And plus, air fork, very tunable. Look at this. See the stanchion there? Look on the other side. See that grease? Already the oil coming out. So we'll see, but usually they put an excess from the factory. See how it leaks down. I know that it hasn't leaked down in 2 days since I aired it up, so that's good. So what do we have so far? I've got bars, I've got grips, I've got the stem, and I have the fork. But I'm gonna go back up to the bars here to something else I added, which is really not required, but I had the part, so I just decided to do it. I know it will push me over my budget by a little bit. That's these brakes, Zoom hydraulic disc brakes. I got these on sale for $59.99. A full kit, front and rear brakes, pre-bled, ready to bolt on. They came with these, the floating rotors with that blue color. Zoom floating rotors, you'll recall from my Project TAF comp, I had black Zoom rotors. That was because I ordered the same brake set. Actually, this is an Anicator. It's always the weird name. You never know what you're gonna get. If you're gonna get Zoom or an off-brand, but these are actual Zoom. Look at that, even the calipers. That anodized blue color, which, look at that, pretty good, right? Especially here at the back, that blue against the blue. Thank you, Mr. Woodpecker. I don't know if you can hear him off in the background there. But this does, at the very least, look good. A little overkill here, because the factory disc brakes, even though budget brakes, that's kind of a crapshoot. You never know if you're gonna get good ones or not. This bike, out of the box, had sparkle. And it turns out the sparkles worked. They stopped the bike well. But still, I had these. I decided blue on blue, I've got to do it. Just so I can see it at the very least. And I like the look, and they do bite better. So hydraulic brakes, always an improvement over the factory mechanical discs on big box bikes. Well, almost always. I have had one case, the after parts. Hydraulics were probably not as good as the sparkles that came on this. But also I want to talk wheel set. I kept the factory wheels with the rim brake channel, which also means the bolt-on wheels are retained, both front and rear, and I'll show you the front in just a second. But I want to talk while I'm back here about the Falcon Sacr. This is a 9-speed. I think I called it an 8-speed just a bit ago, but it's 9-speed. The reason I may have called it an 8-speed is because I actually only have 8 usable. That's where a lot of these budget drivetrains get finicky when you get up to these wider ranges, especially on the freewheel systems. I can either start at the low gear, so easy pedaling, and work my way up 8 speeds, or I can start at the high gear and work my way down 8, sometimes 7, especially coming down it gets a little finicky. And I've checked this hanger, it looks good. I haven't spec'd it, but just eyeball looking, it looks straight at the very least. But I'll do a little more tweaking here. But riding this morning, a little iffy as far as that extra gear. So my 9-speed, at least for this morning, has been really 8. And I can't remember, I'm going to have to go back and watch my original reviews, but as I've mentioned, these budget, I don't know, upgraded budget drivetrains, the factory Pro Rushes and the Falcon Sacrs, if you get past 7, they just seem to get finicky. I don't know if that's because they're a freewheel setup or what, but they do get to be a little finicky. Now, we'll say the Falcon Sacr, one thing it has going for it, it doesn't have the physical clutch lever like a Pro Rush, but it does have a pretty good bit of resistance. I mean, look at this. Not any chipping. Now, it is making a little contact, but the way they kind of built in a chainstay protector, the way they routed their shift cable. So there is that, but yeah, not bad for the budget that they are. Now, I just mentioned the Bolton Wheel, and yeah, because I kept the factory wheel set, that means I kept this, the factory front hub with its bolt-on axle. And yes, you can. You don't have to use quick release. I've had many big box bikes that had bolt-on wheels, and I used the factory fork, put on a different wheel set, and went with the quick release. You can go the other way around too. It's not as advisable because you see I don't have my safety tab there. It's just down low. But bolt-on wheels will work, and in this case, they have to work. I had to make them work. I don't know if you could hear my knee pop when I stood up. That's probably not good. But I had to make it work here. And I did. Not ideal, but I'm trying to do things on the cheap. That gets me to my last cheap part. Back here at this snafu 1x, the 32 tooth, so 32 tooth, and then the wide range at the back with the 9-speed. With my 32 tooth snafu chain ring and my snafu crank arms, remember it had Neko pedals out of the box. Neko pedals are alloy, so that part is good, but they are slippery. They don't have pegs, they just have a couple of raised ridges, and that makes them super slippery. So I put these on, cheap pedals. I got these for $15.99, I believe was the price. And they're supposed to have sealed bearings. It said that they had sealed bearings, but I don't know. They feel solid, so they don't have that wobble like an aluminum shaft, but I haven't taken them apart yet. The reason I bought them, though, is because they do have the pegs. They do have actual mountain bike pegs. They've got a good, nice, wide platform. They are comfortable to stand on, and they grip well. So they are doing their job so far. I'm curious how well these are going to hold up. But they're better than the factory pedals by a long shot. Kind of like going with a cheap air fork. Better than the factory fork. These far better than the factory pedals, even though they're super cheap. So what did I end up with as far as my budgetary goal? Well, I did exceed my $200 thanks to the brakes that I used, which again were $59.99, but that blew. The rotors matching the frame, so cool, at least very close to matching the frame. And look at that. You can see the blue in the blue, it just looks good. And how can I go wrong with those rotors? It looks so good. But $59.99 for the brakes. I spent $15.99 for those pedals, $18.99 for the bars that I bought a long time ago, with the stem for $9.99 that I bought a long time ago. And then the grips, these new Cogsters that I'm actually really impressed with. $11.99. Of course, the fork, the ZTZ, I know, just bear with me on this one. The ZTZ fork, $118.88, which I bought months ago, and I looked today and it's exactly the same price, which is kind of rare. Did I meet my budget? No, I exceeded my budget by about $30-ish. I don't know the actual amount because I'm out on the trail filming this morning. But I did exceed it, though I will say if I didn't put those brakes on and the factory sparkles did work enough to be usable brakes. Matter of fact, when I was riding this to the bike barn to strip off all these parts, I was shocked how well they gripped. I had forgotten. It's like, oh yeah, these little sparkles work pretty good. If I didn't have those, I would have been under my budget by maybe about $10, $20. So project cheap could be cheap. How does it ride? Let me throw in here that I have people ask me all the time, what if I can only do 1 or 2 upgrades are the best upgrades that I can do on my big box bike? Personally, I always go with contact points first. Pedals and grips are the first 2 major impact that you can do to a bike. You can get a kind of a personalized feel. Grips you like, and pedals, it doesn't take much to be better than the slippery, and this is assuming we're talking mountain bike here. Doesn't take much to do better than the slippery pedals from the factory, So anything with pegs will usually be an improvement. And of course the fork. It doesn't take much. I say this often. People ask, which fork is better than the factory fork? Well, usually almost any fork, even if that fork is a ZTZ, it's probably going to be better than the factory fork. Unless it arrives defective, it will provide a better ride. And these budget air forks, you don't have to go with an air fork. And also there's hidden cost in the air forks. A lot of people don't mention that. You need to air it up, and that's a little pump that you have to buy that's $30 if you buy the cheapest pump. I think they're still almost $30. So while these are clearly not perfect, they are definitely, again, if they work out of the box, going to be a much better ride than the factory fork. Brakes optional. You know, hydraulic brakes are just going to be better than standard mechanical disc brakes, at least budget disc brakes. And these Zoom, good for the price, but very, very much optional when it comes to upgrading on the cheap. Otherwise, you know, you can leave a bike the same and get an improved ride. And I may have edited in a little bit of ride footage. Unfortunately, it came with a full SD card, which I do all too often, so I only had a couple of minutes left. So if I edit in anything, it'll be just some quick footage. But just to let you know that this is a better, more fun ride, but I will say the climbing's still a little bit tough because it's still heavy. I did shave a little weight. I'll put the weight on the screen as it is in its current configuration, but almost all the weight savings from the factory fork dropping off because those are just so heavy. There you have it, project cheap, a little over my budget, but it would have been under budget if I didn't use those brakes, which, you know, 180 bucks I'll say is a success. Comment below and let me know what you think. What do you think about the blue and orange theme? Do you like that? Maybe a Broncos fan, something like that. Thanks for watching Kev Central. I hope you subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and enjoy the train in the background. Have a nice day. Have a nice day? Wait a minute. I'm not going to mess that up. Have a great day.